This is a bill that comes to us from the House, passed on a 68 to 23 vote. I'm guessing it's a bipartisan vote. That, from what I've learned about it in the very little time I've had it, is something to do with a 3-strike or a point-based system for habitual offenders. I think the goal of the bill is a righteous goal, which is that the majority of crimes are committed by people who have committed serious crimes in the past. But I'm eager to learn about what I think are some of the challenges with the bill, and also the costs associated with the bill. So excited for the subcommittee to learn more. Any opening comments from my colleagues? Senator Dawson.
No, Mr. Chair.
Senator Knox.
I agree with you. I'm eager to hear about some of the reasons and some of the challenges. Thank you so much.
Before we go to the folks in the room, looks like there's an extensive audience online. So what I will do is give you the heads up now that if you do wish to speak, please use the raise hand function on Zoom. And then when we finish with remarks from folks inside the room, we will call on folks online based on who raised their hand. I would also note, and this has been an issue lately, it doesn't look like it's a problem, but it might be, if you do want to speak, you do need to have your full name in the Zoom. It's against Senate rules for us to acknowledge Zoom user 2623 or even a first name. So unfortunately, we've been once bitten, twice shy in terms of acknowledging the wrong folks on Zoom. So there you go, use the raise hand function, and at this point, you want to give me one of those votes?
What is that? Okay. Where you want to start?
Right here. Okay, unless.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jen Rachi. I'm a legislative liaison with the Department of Corrections. We are currently registered undecided on the bill. So our agency analyzed the projected operational and fiscal impacts of the legislation to help understand how it would impact our Iowa correctional system. Using department records and standard correctional forecasting methods, we developed projections related to sentence length, prison population growth, and the infrastructure and operating costs that would be required if this legislation were implemented. Our projections do assume the point system begins with a clear slate as of July 1, according to the amended bill. So our estimates are based entirely on department data, including historical prison admissions, sentence lengths, and probation records. So at a high level, the legislation increases the sentence length for many individuals entering prison by establishing a 20-year mandatory minimum once the 3-point offense threshold is reached. So currently, so you're aware, the average sentence length for individuals admitted to prison is currently 5.4 years, excluding life sentences. Under this legislation, the average sentence length would increase to approximately 13.4 years, which is more than double the current average length of stay. The primary driver of prison population is how long an individual remains incarcerated. So when sentence lengths increase, the population grows because fewer individuals are leaving the system every year. To provide some context, the department's current prison population is 8,687 individuals. One thing to note with those numbers is our daily statistics do change every day, so those numbers were based on the date that we ran those projections. So as we can see by looking at the legislation, within the first 5 years, our agency would begin to see the impact of the legislation. We estimate by 2030 that the prison population would be projected to reach 9,861 individuals, which represents an increase of nearly 1,200 individuals over today's current system. Over time, the effects compound as individuals remain incarcerated longer. By 2040, the prison population is projected to exceed 18,700 individuals, which is more than double the current population. And by 2045, the projected prison population is anticipated to reach 24,659 individuals, which is nearly 3 times the size of today's system. For some additional context, our department's 9 institutions were designed to hold approximately 6,990 individuals. Our current population already exceeds that by 24 to 25%. And population growth at that level that's projected under this legislation would require additional infrastructure So based on our projected population increases under the legislation, we estimate a need for several infrastructure investments, which could include reopening the CCU with the Iowa State Penitentiary. It could be adding new units at our Iowa State Penitentiary and new correctional facility. There's footing is currently existing in the ground to stand up a new unit to support additional infrastructure there. With the new legislation, we additionally anticipate the need for 1 new maximum security prison, as well as 13 additional medium or minimum security prisons over the course of the next 20 years, given the population increase based on legislation. We worked with the Department of Administrative Services to determine some estimates for you all, and we estimate that over the next 20 years, the state would need to invest approximately $8.35 billion in correctional infrastructure to support the facility need. In addition to those capital costs, we would opt to operate those facilities again over the course of 20 years would require an estimated $474 million in additional annual operating costs, and largely those are primarily driven by staffing, healthcare needs, utilities, food services, and other resources that would be required to maintain a correctional facility on a 24-hour basis. One thing to note, last thing, and then I'll pass off the microphone. Correctional infrastructure isn't stood up immediately. To establish a new housing unit that we discussed, it could take 3 to 5 years once funding is secured, and a prison could take anywhere from 5 to 7 years to site and construct.
Don't pass it off yet. Would you mind?
Oh, sorry.
Twisting a little towards you. I don't know. Hopefully online they picked up as much of that.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Colleagues, any questions for the Department of Corrections?
Yes, so your first stat there, you said you're at 5.4 years for the average sentence, correct? That's a court sentence, or when you say 5 years to 13 point, what is a sentence? What's your definition?
The excluding of a sentence. Yeah, and we have Dwayne Caldwell, and I can have him maybe speak to some of that, but it's basically the average amount of time that a person remains incarcerated, and that's just taking the average estimate of everybody that's incarcerated,
Okay.
Excluding life sentences.
Okay, so that's incarceration time,
Yes.
not sentence.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And taking that there, are you also including parole in that incarceration time? Or is that 5.4 years you stayed physically inside?
That is
prison?
in the prison time.
Okay.
Yes.
And my additional question on that is, what's the actual sentence? Do you have any data points of what the court is sentencing someone to what is the reality there, right? So if it's 5.4 years of incarceration time, you have a data point that says, well, they actually had a 20-year sentence to begin with, but they're only serving 5.4. Maybe it is 5.4 or 5.4.
Yeah, and we'd have to look at it, and that's just an average basis of every single criminal penalty that would be, so we're just using that as an example of the projected sentence length. So we're just trying to show you that under the legislation, how that changes overall. Average, obviously, individuals who would be convicted under this legislation would be serving a 20-year mandatory minimum.
Any other questions?
Yeah, real quick, I have questions, thank you. Sorry, yes, so you said 24% overcrowded, 25% overcrowded
Yep.
currently. And that's just with people that are incarcerated for they're doing time served for 5.4 years. New staffing, overhead to get this done of 400 million plus, but where are you now with staffing levels? Do you have enough staff to currently run the prisons that we have now?
So we do have open positions, and I could get you numbers on what that looks like as far as correctional officers. I know for our correctional officers, we are at a low, typically I think we're around 120 or 125 open positions for correctional officers. Obviously that's not every position statewide, but we are managing our population right now, but a lot of that has to do with having successful recidivism rates and effective reentry protocols to help manage that long-term population as well.
So you are having successful recidivism?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, we've stated times before that, much of our ability to manage that overpopulation is attributed to our low recidivism rates, and that comes from investing in people and programs and providing effective treatment, because we are at 32.8%, which is the lowest recidivism rate that we've had in the last 10 years, and that directly impacts the number of people who are not returning to prison.
Okay, and so, real quick question, correct me if I say this yes or no. So it's already hard to staff what we have now. we have to build 2 new prisons eventually, 1 max, 1 mid, to fill this new sentencing guideline. So it would be even more extremely hard to staff.
Yeah, so those would be factors that we would need to take into consideration, you know, depending on, you know, if it gets to the point where the legislature wants to fund additional need for infrastructure or a potential prison. We would have to look at several factors that would go into that. Workforce availability would definitely be one of them, as far as determining, you know, location, because it does take staffing, and to successfully operate a facility, and we also have to keep in mind, you know, the safety and security of the individuals we care for in our system as well as our staff.
And staff, right? And then I guess one more question, sorry. We were in another sub earlier this year where the parole board came and they talked about, you know, increasing mandatory minimums, increasing people's prison lengths, that eventually we're gonna have to do a 1 in, 1 out type deal with a lot of folks that maybe we don't wanna have to do 1 in, 1 out. Would this only, accelerate the 1 in, 1 out type thing that the parole board would have to consider?
Yeah, so I can't speak on behalf of the parole board and how they would manage that. You know, we're kind of bookend, to be completely honest. So we take in the individuals that are sentenced to our facilities, and then we do provide release recommendations to the parole board, but ultimately the decision to release an individual does lie with the board of parole. And so that would be a question that we better pose to them.
Thank you.
You've been part of the discussions, I assume, at the House level and throughout that process. And obviously, the House is aware of the costs and potential growth for inmate population. Was there discussion at all by the Iowa House on, you know, utilizing like other states have private providers for incarceration, private prisons?
I'm not aware of any discussion that has occurred, at least that they weren't, they didn't occur with our agency if they were.
Good. Anything else, guys? All right.
Hi, I'm Ryan Ben with the Family Leader. We are monitoring the bill, currently registered undecided. We were registered undecided originally because we had some pastors and ministry leaders in our network who work with people who struggle with addiction, raise concern about including addiction-related substances in the strikes system. The House is aware of that concern, has been moving in the right direction, moving it from three possession convictions all the way up to 5 for non-marijuana controlled substances. It would take to get the 3 strikes, so we appreciate that. We're just monitoring the bill right now.
See if I can juggle both of these things at the same time.
You can sit while you do it. That helps.
That
Why
way
don't you
I'll
take it, by the way?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Scott Payton. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at Prison Fellowship. Prison Fellowship is the nation's largest Christian nonprofit equipped in the church to serve currently and formerly incarcerated people and their families. We are opposed to the changes to We're opposed to the changes in House File 2542. Prison Fellowship was founded by Chuck Colson nearly 50 years ago, and Chuck was a special counsel to Richard Nixon. He was convicted of a Watergate-related crime, served time in federal prison, and after his release, he started Prison Fellowship. Today, Prison Fellowship is in over 1,100 prisons across the United States. We're in 5 prisons here in Iowa. And we provide a variety of faith-based programming inside the prisons. And one of our premier programs is the Prison Fellowship Academy. It's a year-long faith-based program that works with men and women inside a prison. There was a study in Texas that showed the participants of our academy, their recidivism rate was 53.8% less than a controlled study group, and that was conducted by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Prior to my policy work, I was a probation and parole officer in Louisiana for a little over a decade. So I have seen firsthand the difficult balance of providing accountability for those who are coming out of prison, but also offering them a pathway to redemption. Yeah, the proposed changes here, they're sweeping, they pose different levels of public safety risk. Applying these enhancements broadly can dilute the focus of those who truly pose the greatest risk to public safety, and they also limit judicial discretion. You know, the punishment must fit the crime. Mandatory minimums of 20 years, especially where misdemeanor offenses contribute to point accumulation, could result in sentences that exceed what is necessary to protect the public. And research consistently shows that while incarceration plays an important role in incapacitating those who pose a high risk to public safety, increasing sentence limits beyond what is necessary can have diminishing returns in reducing crime. And evidence also indicates that certainty and swiftness of punishment has a greater deterrent effect than longer sentences. And expanding mandatory minimums and broadening the qualifying offenses under House File 2542 is likely to increase the prison population and further strain Iowa's correctional system. Greater strain may limit programming like that of Prison Fellowship, although we do not receive any money from local, state, or federal government, and it can cause a further strain on Iowa's correctional system. This strain reduces reoffending, may limit programming that will reduce reoffending and increase safety risk for correctional officers and incarcerated individuals. And no matter what the cost is for this, we have to ensure that the money that we spend, the taxpayer dollars, actually accomplishes the goal of reducing repeat violent offenders. We certainly agree that those who continue to repeat, commit violent crimes should be incarcerated, though that punishment should be proportional to the crime that they committed. And we know that Iowa can strengthen public safety by ensuring that their habitual sentencing laws remain narrowly focused on repeat violent criminal activity while preserving judicial discretion to impose sentences that reflect both accountability and proportionality. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Tom Chapman with the Iowa Catholic Conference and represent the Catholic bishops in Iowa, and they're registered opposed to the bill. Big picture, according to the Catholic Church, punishment by civil authorities has a couple of purposes. We want to protect society, we want to restore public order, and we'd like to find some conversion or restoration of the offender as well. We stand with victims. Every diocese, which is a region for us, every region in the country has some sort of victim assistance program, whether it's for domestic violence or sexual abuse or victims of violence, things like that. So every diocese is responsible to do that, so we stand with victims. With these things in mind, on principle, the Catholic bishops would oppose new mandatory minimum sentences because they think it would take away some of the discretion from judges who are trying to consider individual outcomes. And so we would appreciate it if you not support the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Connie Ryan, I'm the Executive Director and Lobbyist for Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund, and we're registered opposed to the legislation for many of the reasons that have already been spoken about, so I won't repeat everything, except for, the other piece of this is the disparities that we know happen, in the system as a whole, but also with mandatory minimums. And so we are opposed for a lot of the same reasons, but also just want to add the piece of disparities that happen, and adding another mandatory minimum will just exacerbate that issue. Thank you.
What disparities?
Primarily racial disparities.
Good afternoon, Senators. Lisa Davis Cook with the Iowa Association for Justice. We are registered as opposed to this bill. I'm not going to repeat things that my colleagues have said. I just want to make one comment, and that is in the House there was an amendment that narrowed the bill a little bit, and it was said that it took out non-violent offenses, and the fact is it really didn't. I've still got a whole list of non-violent offenses that are either aggravated misdemeanors or serious misdemeanors or felonies that are still included in the bill. So I just want to make sure that's clear, that not all non-violent offenses were taken out, and I can provide you with that list if you'd like. But what I'd really like to do is let two Iowans speak who would have been impacted by this bill, who went to prison and are rehabilitated and are doing great things now. So I'd like them to each tell their story. First is John, and then Tracy.
My name is John West. Thank you for the time to hear me out. I'd like to speak about the reason I'm here today. I watched the news a few weeks ago, and I heard a guy stand behind a podium and say, this bill is for people who are unwilling to be rehabilitated. And that hit me hard because he was speaking of me. He was talking about me, of how I used to be. That is a fact. On March 25th, 2021, my life changed forever. I found sobriety and have completely rebuilt my life in a way that, I didn't even dream possible. I got sober for a year, and ultimately the judge sentenced me to prison on April 4th, 2022. But he had the opportunity to not give me a 20-year mandatory, which I will forever be grateful for. I did spend some time in prison. I do have a record that is not something I'm proud of, but it is a fact of who I used to be. Since being released from prison, I have taken steps to keep moving forward with my life. I have become a certified peer recovery specialist. I am employed with an amazing organization called YSS, where I work with youth every single day, and I get to give back to a community that is very dear to me. I get to give them, hopefully, a little bit of hope that people do recover, because that is something I have done day in, day out, is worked on rebuilding my life, so I don't have to be another statistic, so I don't have to ever be on the criminal docket again. That's my goal, is to succeed in this life and be a functioning member of society. The judge did not have that opportunity to that day. I would still have 17 years left on my mandatory, and that scares me. With me being released, I'm also grateful that the taxpayers of Iowa are not footing my bill. I'm a functioning member of society. I am paying my fines. I am paying back the debt that I owe the state and the people of Iowa. Every single day I get the opportunity to do that, and I'm extremely grateful for that. Thank you.
John, thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Grip, and I'm the director of the Corrections Recovery Program for Full Circle Recovery. It's a program I developed out of my own experience of addiction and incarceration. I've been incarcerated twice. The second time I was sentenced to state prison with a 3-year mandatory under the Iowa's current habitual offender law. During that time, I wasn't eligible for any of the limited programming, despite having a history of substance abuse. Thankfully, I had previously maintained 17 years of recovery and was able to use that as a foundation for self-directed change. My experience in state prison is what led me to dedicate my life to bringing resources back inside our jails and prisons. Today, through my program, we connect with people across Iowa's correctional facilities and help them initiate and sustain change. If Iowa's goal is public safety and fewer repeat offenses, one of the most effective investments we can make is expanding rehabilitative programming inside our facilities rather than expanding the number of people who will spend decades in them. People can turn their lives around if given the opportunity. Not everyone will take advantage of that, but many do, and I'm living proof of that. If this bill had been law in 2019, I would still be in prison with over a decade remaining on my sentence. Instead, I'm here talking about the work I'm doing to help Iowans on the road to recovery. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Tony Phillips with the Iowa State Sheriffs and Deputies Association. This was not a bill of ours, but it's one we support because the issue of habitual offenders is a significant one. And you can't talk to a sheriff or deputy around the state. They can't tell you the known individuals in their county, folks that have been through that county jail 10, 20 times, and they keep coming back in a repetitive pattern of leniency given to folks that are causing an outsized amount of disruption in the communities. And unfortunately, what that process does is you play a game until they commit a serious enough offense, Class A or Class B felony, that they do serve a significant amount of time. And it's unfortunate for the person that's at the end of that line and waiting for that to happen to them. And so what the Sheriffs and Deputies Association is supportive of is you guys addressing this habitual offender issue, that small number of people that are having a large impact on public safety in the state of Iowa. So thank you for bringing this bill up today.
All right. Is there anyone online? I didn't see any hands raised. I'll give you another chance to raise your hand. There's Brian. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Brian, you we should be able to hear you now.
Thank you. I don't guess my camera is enabled.
No cameras. Again, once bitten, 3 times shy.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Brian Whitehouse. I'm State Legislative Affairs Manager at FAM. We're a national nonprofit, nonpartisan reform organization. Our name is actually Families Against Mandatory Minimums, so we stand in opposition to this bill. Please note that we don't stand in opposition to accountability and the need for the state of Iowa to be able to appropriately sentence when necessary for extreme cases. However, in our experience, we find that the imposition of mandatory minimum sentence often sweeps up people who do not necessarily meet the needs here. I think you saw that in some of the people who testified before you today, that had this law been in effect, they would actually still be incarcerated, but yet here they are doing well and actually contributing to their communities. I think there's an underlying belief here that repeat habitual offenders are a result of a lack of harsh punishment. I do applaud Iowa for having a significantly low recidivism rate. However, that there could be room for improvement there. I would just ask that this committee invest into people and not into prisons. I know that this bill would lead to incredible fiscal costs. We heard some of the testimony and projections. One of the things that's not often apparent is when we do put people into prison for extreme amount of times, they age in that time frame. They become elderly, sick, infirm, and the cost of incarceration can often double or even triple in cost. For the last 2 years, our organization has been working with the Iowa legislature on House Study Bill 314, which would create a medical release mechanism for Iowa. Iowa is currently the only state that does not have such a mechanism, so we're a little bit more intimately aware of the long-term costs of such bills by giving extreme sentences. I hope that you will seek more fiscal responsible ways to address the problem of habitual offending. We do think it's a worthy problem to fix. I agree with the representative from the Sheriff's Association, or the sheriff's people. We can't turn a blind eye to the problem, but this is not the solution. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Seeing no further online viewers seeking the floor, I'll turn it over to my colleagues for closing remarks. Senator Knox.
1 minute.
1 minute.
So, obviously, personal and both professional experience in reentry. I work in this field now constantly. I see folks like Mr. West, Ms. Gibbs all the time coming through that with an opportunity like this, or a bill like this with this kind of mandatories would hurt more people than it would help, for sure. And not only people that are, as Ms. Davis-Cook said, that list is still extensive about people that should not be serving 20 years for crimes that they do. But as the Sheriff's Department said, it's a very small number of people that are these habitual offenders that we do need to have accountability for. I think we already have a bill or we already have current law for habitual offenders that is good and maybe can be worked on from there, but this is just not the right way to go. And just the fiscal note alone should be enough for us to stop this bill, but then the impact on people that we shouldn't be incarcerating for this long, I think is just a side note. Not even a side note, but a reality of this bill.
Thanks, Senator Knox. Senator Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to say thank you for coming out here and testifying today in the subcommittee. As bad as the building gets on some days, it's always good to see redemption there, right? Like that gives you a little positive boost throughout your daily traffic policies. Lisa, you provided a list of those crimes there. It'd be interesting to look at that. I think this is a difficult topic because I think the legislature is part of the problem in some ways, and there's Senator Busslow's heard this rant from me before. We have what I like to call penalty creep around here, right? And the reality is that we have a crime, and invariably what happens is that the person committing the crime gets sentenced to go to jail, to get out early, and then there becomes public outrage, we're rolling out crime, people come to the legislature, and what we do, we have the penalty, up the penalty, up the penalty. So we really dilute the meaning of these penalties around here, and I voted for some of these before too, because which goes right into the next topic of truth in sentencing, right? And ma'am, that's why I asked you the questions earlier on, because the reality, there's a difference between the sentencing time and the incarceration time, right? I think DOC does a lot of good work, but on the other side of that too, DOC does push out a lot of people early, a lot of times, so we hear that anecdotally in all of our congressional districts, right? And which kind of brings back to my focal point here, why we're talking about this, is that, and I think the other side of this is on the victims, right? We need to have some truth in sentencing, be able to ensure that when a family is, a family member is a victim of a crime and they go to that judge and the judge says 10 years, or whatever the case might be, it doesn't mean that DOC rolls them out within a matter of 18 months and then it's a broken promise. And so I know there's a lot of conversation trying to work through all this here, but I do think throughout all this discussion, obviously there's going to be a cost here. We have to contemplate that too. But obviously, as well, we have to understand there's a difference between a sentence and incarceration, and we have to start to find a meaningful system that means that on both ends gives the opportunity for restoration, as well as too is mixed system at least has some credibility. And I just feel like more times than not, we're losing credibility with the way we currently operate here. Increasing penalties on our end, the courts let them out early or whatever, the DOC parole-wise, and then it ends up being broken promises, and we're just continuing the spin cycle over and over and over. I think that'd be a better system for everyone in the end here. So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move this out today as we continue the conversation on this.
Thank you, Senator Dawson. Thank you, Senator Knox. Ms. Gibbs, Mr. Webb. Thank you for taking time to be here and the courage to do it. I don't know that I would have the courage to do what you did and say the words you said in a place that is intimidating for me to show up to. And so I really appreciate it. I echo and respect the comments from Senator Dawson about sentences and time served, and have had family friends impacted by that who, there was somebody who was watching their child. The child was injured and unfortunately passed away. They were sentenced to prison, and baby died, and somebody spent less than a year and a half in prison, and they were released, and they were sentenced to much more. And also our creeping of all of the folks that we want to protect validly, but then all of a sudden we're taking away meaning from the true sentences that come there. And it's undeniable that repeat offenders, to the Sheriff's Association, that repeat offenders are committing a majority of the crimes. We know that, right? And that's a challenge. And it's something that is common sense also, because if you talk to any sheriff's deputy, when something bad goes wrong in the county, or anyone in law enforcement, period, when something goes wrong in the county or the city or the state, like they, round up the usual suspects, not to misquote a movie. The unfortunate thing is also that when the legislature acts, we act with a broad brush. We are incapable, in my opinion, of operating with a scalpel. We often operate with a machete. And something like this bill requires balance. I'm going to move it forward today in the interest of the legislative process to continue to work through what that balance is between the very valid public policy goal of how do we better address the repeat offenders that are in the system, not only through rehabilitation and the things on the back end, but also hopefully through sentencing that in some cases, it's valid to keep these folks off the streets. With the idea that the broad sword with which we could come down could unjustly keep people from finding the redemption and the justice in their own life. So we'll move it forward with the understanding that this is not the version I don't believe that I could support in the very end, but with the idea that the goal, the public policy goal behind it is valid and just. So I appreciate everyone being here today. We'll call to close the subcommittee on House File 2542.